Welcome to Taking the Higher Road, a special show dedicated to the trucking industry, specifically at the confluence of recruiting, retention, and compliance. In the fourth year as the host of the show, I bring over 2 decades of industry experience, both on the carrier side as well as the vendor side. And each week I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges. I always appreciate your feedback, good or bad. Don't forget to leave a rating and a review. I'd also like to thank and highlight the show's valuable sponsors. Their dedication and commitment to the industry and to the show is greatly appreciated. If you're interested in being a sponsor of the show or joining me for an interview, please email Jeremy at takingthehigherroad.com. Now, this week, I'm excited to be joined by a great friend whose expertise in the power and importance of communication is something I'd like to tap into, especially as driver retention and just overall morale is so critical in this environment. Lisa Battaglia, founder and president of Battaglia Communications. Thank you so much for joining me, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be on the show.
Well, I'm glad to have you here, and I'd love to dive into your background and hear how trucking became one of your sort of industries of choice as you recognize the opportunities that fleets have to just improve their communications, both internally and externally. Perhaps we can also get into the importance of creating a culture of safety and a culture of appreciation, and then how communication is just the bedrock, for that. I'd also like to touch on transparency and the importance of building and just fostering trust among the workforce. And lastly, we'll also answer a question from a listener during our deeper dive segment. Does that work for you?
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Well, I normally start with a book recommendation. Is there a particular book that you might recommend that's been impactful to you?
Absolutely. Brian Filko's Leading People Safely, which was also co-written with Jim Schultz. I actually have had the privilege to work with Brian for many years and helped him with this book. And I think it's just the go-to book on how to lead people safely through a healthy company culture development and safety culture.
Yeah, that's a great book. It's been referenced before. And in fact, I bought that book, and this is before my driver reach days, when I owned a staffing company, all of our leadership team went through that book. And so I think you and I first met maybe back around 2017 or 2018. It was definitely pre-COVID. And you were working closely with Brian Filko, who was at the time, he was the CEO of Jetco Delivery out of Houston. And so anyway, I think it was around that. I mean, that's around the time that I, bought that book. So anyway, excellent choice. Brian Filko is a great friend, and I know he is of yours too. So, with your expertise in internal, marketing, safety culture, employee engagement, I think this is going to be a lot of fun and certainly super insightful for our listeners. Do you mind? Can you share the story of just how you founded Battaglia Communications and sort of what led you to focus on internal marketing and safety culture, specifically in trucking?
Yes. Well, I founded Battaglia Communications in 2022 because I saw a need for companies to start to shift some of their marketing communication efforts from the outside to the inside. I am a strong believer that communication is key in safety, which obviously has profound bottom line results. And as part of that, I work with companies to develop and execute strategic marketing and communication plans that focus on employees and employee engagement to help drive retention, promote safety, and ultimately drive bottom line results. And so Battaglia Communications was founded out of a need that I saw in the trucking industry, having been in trucking for a long time, to really help companies create that marketing and strategic communication plan.
Well, I want to unpack the internal marketing concept, because I think all too often, so many of us, when we think about marketing, it's external, it's customer acquisition or that sort of thing. But you make a super relevant case for internal marketing. Why do you believe that it's so crucial, for one, and maybe if not more so, than external marketing for a company's success?
Absolutely. First, external marketing, it's fantastic. It's needed. You need to communicate with your clients or potential clients. But I think part of what's missing is the people who are driving that interaction with your clients, who are delivering, who are responsible for productivity, responsible for safety. Those are your internal employees. And so I often ask companies to kind of shift their thinking that who are really your most important clients. and those are your employees. And so what are you doing to communicate with them? How are you regularly communicating? What's the message that you're putting out there? And essentially realizing that safety is driven by behavior, and what drives behavior, and that's communication, and it's leadership stepping in, setting the example, and opening up lines of communication with frontline employees, especially drivers.
Well, let's hone in on safety first. There's a few different facets that I want to explore, but since around the time that we first met, the number of nuclear verdicts and settlements, and certainly along with the severity of them, has just grown exponentially. And the risk is real, and it's something that it keeps a lot of fleet owners up at night. Those who I interview on this show, it's pretty common, phenomenon. It's scary. And so, given that backdrop, let's kind of focus on safety. What role does a strong internal communication strategy play in building a solid safety culture?
Yeah, I think first of all, talking about these massive settlements, I mean, we all know that one safety failure, one catastrophic incident can wipe out the whole company, not to mention just the impact that it has on employees and families and everybody who's involved. And so where I think communication, internal communication and marketing steps in is, how are you communicating with your drivers and with your frontline employees about, one, safety policies and procedures and the consistency around that and what they are. Two, around the importance of, why safety, and having that emotional hook to it. It's about more than just, delivering freight or ensuring that you get to the customer. It's essentially about employees going home safely to their families every night. So really communicating with employees around the what, the why, and the how, what the expectations are. And I think that when those lines of communication open up, and when managers and C-suite employees are talking with frontline employees about safety and what's expected, it helps to reduce incidents. I mean, communication is key.
Well, you make a really good point too, as far as, it's not even that we just don't want our employees. I mean, we want our employees to get home safely, but it's also all of the motoring public. Right? It's nobody wants that. And that's one of the things that I think is unique about trucking is competitors, legitimate trucking industry competitors, carriers at conferences, shoulder to shoulder, working together on, how best practices from the safety and compliance standpoint, because even though they compete for freight and, for business and so on, at the end of the day, nobody wants to see anybody getting hurt, getting killed.
Right. And I think part of communication steps in there. I mean, it's talking with your drivers about the importance of what they do, that not only is their safety, in their hands, but the safety of the motoring public is as well. And really talking with drivers about not only the importance, but who they are on the road. They're the ambassadors of the road. They're the professional drivers, right? They're the ones that went to school, trained for this. And so reminding them that that's important, that they're valued, and that everyone's counting on them.
So one of the things that somebody told me once, because to get to that why, to sort of connect the dots for a driver, was to put a picture of that driver's granddaughter in the dash. And it's one of those things that that's about as good a reminder as you can get to always remember why you do what you do and why safety is so important, and why you don't cut corners because you want to be around. You want to be here for this little granddaughter, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's the, follow someone and follow the people in front of you as if your loved ones are in the car.
Right. So how do companies create maybe a sense of ownership among their employees when it comes to like these safety initiatives and internal branding?
So I think first thing, it's just opening up lines of communication. And it's bigger than just, throwing out emails or having meetings. It is having a strategy around, one, who are you communicating to? Two, how are you communicating, and how are people receiving information? And creating those open lines of communication where not only is communication feeding from the top down, but also from drivers up. They want to be heard, they want to be involved, and making sure that all voices are heard and that they matter. And that dialogue is just really important. And you mentioned internal safety branding. I work on this a lot with companies. I cannot stress enough how impactful I think that it is. But, we all have our external brand, what our company brand, and that's what our clients and potential clients see. It's how they recognize, who we are and what we do. But if we, like we talked about earlier, if we're starting to shift that thought about who are our most important clients to the inside, and those are our employees, then I think it's really important to have an internal brand as well. And that is, it's only internal for your, for your team. It doesn't really matter if your customers see that. That's not the point. The point is that it is a visual representation of your organization's mission, vision, and values. Ultimately, when we're talking about the trucking industry, it is a representation of your company's safety culture. And the process by which companies go through building something like that to begin with is so important. And when I work with companies on this internal branding, part of getting that buy-in and getting team members to believe in it, recognize it, uphold it, and when they see it, they know what that means, is bringing them in from the very beginning. So, I think when it comes to an external marketing brand, you're going to have a marketing person come in and a graphic designer, and they're going to create that and you decide on it. But in this case, part of getting that buy-in is turning the reins over to your employees and letting them come up with, the slogan or tagline, contributing their ideas and then getting them to vote on which ones they like, giving them logo options to accompany that and letting them vote on those too. And I've done this many times with clients, and it's amazing to see how the process works and how many responses people get when you send something out, say, hey, what does our safety culture mean to you? Like, send us your ideas. People want to be heard and they want to be involved in that process. And I cannot tell you, I've worked with companies where we've had hundreds and hundreds of responses. And so from the beginning of that process is the beginning of building not only that brand, but that commitment to safety where people feel like they're involved in the process because they are,
Yeah, I guess that's a really good segue. I guess, we're talking about safety. Let's sort of switch gears and talk about this challenging environment that we're in. Because, the fact that anybody I talk to for really at least, well, certainly for 2 years, but definitely the last 6 months or so, just tired, just so tired, so worn out from this constant slog with just what seems like no real end in sight. And so sort of given that backdrop, let's focus on the importance of morale and retention, not just for drivers, but for the entire workforce. Because I know you talk about, employees being the company's most valuable audience. How can they effectively, engage employees to boost retention, to boost morale, specifically with that goal?
Again, it comes right back down to communication. So one is opening up lines of communication to create transparency, making sure that employees know what's going on in the company, that they feel like they are a part of it, that there's an open door policy so that they feel like they can communicate with managers clearly and tell them what's going on, express concern, and then receive feedback back. I mean, having those conversations about safety and about what's going on and expectations is important. And I think the biggest thing is making sure that people are valued, that they're seen. No one wants to be a number. You could go to any trucking company and be a number, but what company is making sure that their employees know that at the end of the day, they're the most important things, that their safety is the most important. They are, driving bottom line results for the organization. So I think, communication, obviously, and consistent communication, having a strategy around how you're going to not only the message and the talking points that you want to communicate, but how that's going to be delivered. And then I also think that creating awards and recognitions where you're providing shout outs for team members who are doing the right thing, who are upholding safety, and your safety brand is important. But I think an important thing with this is that a lot of times I see management or the C-suite is they're the ones who are determining which employees are going to be recognized. And I think it's really important for peers to be accountable to each other And so for employees to nominate each other for different awards or to send shout outs, because they're the ones working together, they're on the road, they know what's going on. And I think that creates that accountability where they're seeing each other, and then they're also seeing that leadership is recognizing them as well.
So a couple of things. The consistency, I think, is a great point too, because it's not just that you communicate and engage. And I'm talking from a leadership, especially given the backdrop of the challenging times that we're in. But also, I think I'm a firm believer in the transparency. Sometimes it's not always good news. Sometimes the news is it's really tough and we are struggling. We're not alone. Everyone is in the same boat. But I'm not going to pretend that, I'm not. You can be confident that we'll get through this, but also still honest. So that people understand, like, hey, we all got to work together here. We're going to probably have to hunker down, for a bit longer, but it's okay because I'm going to still engage. I'm going to communicate. And as things progress and improve, I will communicate that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's that transparency, and that's bringing team members in so that there's not a dividing line between C-suite and frontline employees where everything's happening behind closed doors and the plans are being made. When times are tough, which they are right now, I think it's important to bring frontlines in, bring drivers in, talk with them about what's going on, and then also solicit their feedback. What do you think we can do to be better? Where do you see the gaps happening? And creating that dialogue is essential.
You talked about sort of employee recognition and those sorts of things. Is there anything that comes to mind, if there's some maybe most effective ways that you've seen companies recognize employee achievements and sort of build that culture of appreciation? I love the peer suggestion, by the way. I think that is fantastic.
It works. I've seen it work where, you have an opportunity for employees to nominate each other. Sometimes it's, a quarterly award, but it's the employees nominating other people on their team. And first of all, it's about making that easy for them to do. Like, how are you communicating that this is happening, and how are people nominating? Like, the logistics of that is important to make it easy for people to be able to participate. And again, that comes back to the communication strategy. But then, asking people to nominate each other is important. But then I think once that happens, the question is, well, what are you going to do with it? And I see this a lot with companies where maybe there's an award, there's an email sent out, and then that's it. But you have this great piece of information, and it's about finding the right method to share that information with a variety of audiences. So obviously internally, you want to share that with your team and say, hey, this person has done X, Y, and Z. We're so proud of them. Like, join us and congratulate them. But then also you can flip that around, and this is a chance to share that with potential clients and clients as well. It's highlighting, the talent that you have, the importance that your team is placing on safety, and showcasing those people. People want to see people. People want to know who they're working with and know, who is the one that's delivering the product that I need. So I think that's important in terms of shout outs. But then also I'm a really big believer in bringing families in as well. I mean, especially in the trucking industry, you think about, you've got a driver reporting to the yard at 5 a.m., but they've been out with their spouse or their loved one until 2 o'clock. That doesn't work. And so I think it's important to bring families in as your allies for safety. Let them know what the mission, vision, values are. Let them know how important their loved one is to the organization, to the entire, supply chain, to moving America forward. And then here's another opportunity to share that shout out or that recognition is, how are you communicating with families? I mean, I think a spouse getting a letter home just highlighting that, their loved one is the employee of the month or the quarter or whatever, that's important. And that's creating that buy-in around culture and organizational values and transparency.
Well, on transparency specifically, we talked about leadership. How does that transparency and trust between leadership and employees, how does that reduce turnover and improve, company? Like, it's the how, right? How does that happen?
Again, it starts with communication, and it starts with leadership knowing who they're talking to. And I believe that it doesn't matter if you have 25 employees or 25,000 employees. It is important that communication is flowing in all directions so that everyone feels valued. And so as part of that, transparency, which ultimately creates trust, it is what you said before. It's being honest. It's not always great news. That's okay. And when it's bad news, it's okay to deliver it, but know how to deliver it, right? Know how your audience is going to receive that information so that it most resonates with them. Not because you're not trying to create fear or urgency or anything like that. It's what's in it for them. How is it going to impact them, and how can they be part of the solution? And I think asking for that, how can I be part of the solution, or how can I contribute, is creating that transparency and dialogue that ultimately drives retention, because people want to be seen and heard and know that their opinion matters and they're valued.
Yeah. So I'm going to want to give you a chance to share some of your contact information with the audience. But before I do that, I want to transition to the deeper dive segment. This is where we answer a question submitted by a listener.
Okay.
Today's deeper dive question is brought to you by Career Now Brands. And the question is, do you have any advice on how to turn our internal employees into better brand ambassadors? I feel like you'd be a pretty good person to ask this question to.
Yes. So, we're talking about our employees being billboards, basically, walking billboards. In fact, I would argue that rather than investing in a recruiting billboard on the side of the road, take that money and invest it in internal communication and driving internal culture. Because when your employees are seen, heard, valued, they're more engaged, they're happier, they feel, more part of the organization. And they talk. Employees talk with each other. They talk with, people outside of the organization. And so when you have engaged and happy employees, they're your walking billboard. Now, on the flip side of that, when you have a rotating door and your retention is suffering and you've got people in and out and they don't feel valued, they don't feel heard, that's going to be communicated out too. And people don't want to work for companies where they feel like they're not going to stay long, or that it's not something that's going to help them, better themselves in their career. Or where it's just kind of a stop on the way to something else. People want to stay for a while. And so I think creating that communication strategy, opening up lines of communication, internal brand building, awards and recognitions, everything that we've talked about is helping to drive this engagement that ultimately creates ambassadors for your brand. People want to tell people about it, and clients want to work with the best. And so when your employees are engaged, then they're also delivering the best service to your customers. And that's just it's circular. And it all comes back down to bottom line results.
So this is your area of expertise. This is what you do. This is how you help companies. So for those in the audience who don't yet know you, I would highly encourage you to connect with Lisa on LinkedIn. But how else can they find you and learn more about the work that you do with Battaglia Communications?
Yes, I have a website. It's battagliacom.com. So B as in boy, ATTAGLIACOMM.com. Has my contact information there. And I'm always happy to talk with people about, what are you doing to engage your employees? What does that internal communication strategy look like? And brainstorming about how you can make it better.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. Appreciate your insights and look forward to seeing you at some upcoming industry events.
Yes, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for having me on.
And thank you for taking the higher road with me. Once again, special thanks to the sponsors of the show. We really appreciate you. If you're interested in being a sponsor or joining me for an interview, please email Jeremy at takingthehigherroad.com. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.